Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome you at the Galicia Jewish Museum.
This will be in Polish, but if you don't speak Polish, you can help yourself with headsets at the back. So if there's anyone that doesn't speak Polish, I see that you've already dealt with that.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome very much. My name is Jakub Nowakowski. I'm the director of the Galicia Jewish Museum in Krakow. It is my great pleasure to host you today and another panel discussion within a series of Inseparable, the difficult issues in Polish-Jewish relations. After a year, for the first time, we have re-entered the space of our Galicia Jewish Museum, and for the first time it's not done online since a year ago. It's being transmitted online, but we're very happy to host our audience here in the Galicia Jewish Museum. The subject of our meeting today is called Between a Monument and a Product, the process of commemoration and commercialization of post-Jewish spaces. And Krakow and Kazimiera seem to be a good departure point for the discussion of these questions. The post-Jewish spaces, Jewish districts are being adapted, modified, and redefined. How much have they been appropriated by the Jewish community? How much have they been? Or are they being sold as tourist products? How much are they authentic, and how much have they been turned into theme parks, or perhaps deprived of the Jewish essence? They are becoming a place without history. Our panelists today, among our panelists today, we have Dr. Edyta Gawron, a historian at the Institute of Judaic Studies of the Gawron Universities. She specializes in the history of the Polish Jews in the 20th century, especially Krakow Jews. She's also the head of the chairwoman of the Galicia Jewish Museum. She collaborates with numerous academic and museum institutions in Poland and abroad. She's on the advisory board of the Holocaust Research Council in Europe. And in the context of our subject today, she's also the co-author of the exhibition in Krakow at the time of the German occupation in the Oskar Schindler Factory Museum. Dr. Natalia Romik, a graduate of political studies, a designer, and a member of the Polish Architects Society. She received a PhD in College London, Great Britain, and her PhD work, was post-Jewish architecture of non-memory in former shtetls. Her main areas of research is post-Jewish architecture of memory within the niche design architecture. She's also co-created exhibitions in the Polin Museum. She was also one of the co-authors of the redesign of the synagogue in Chmielnik. She also co-authored the temporary exhibition on March 1968 in the Polin Museum 2 years ago. And last but not least, Wojciech Wilczyk, a photographer, an art critic, a curator, but also a poet and an essayist. His creativity mostly consists of documental sets, for example, a set of photographs on Passion in Kalwaria Zobrzydowska, on Catholic ceremonies. And he's also created and published The Innocent Eye Doesn't Exist, where he documented the current state of the former Jewish synagogues and places that do not function as places of religious cult anymore. He's considered one of the most important documentalists of Jewish spaces. This panel, like all the previous panels, will be led by Kazimiera Szczuka, Dr. Kazimiera Szczuka. Let me thank all our partners today, without whom the panel would not be possible, the event and the current foundations and the Gawron University. Thank you very much, and let me pass the floor to the host of the panel. Welcome very much, ladies and gentlemen. We, as always, have facing the dilemma of who should speak first. But before I ask any question, let me remind you that at the moment a few days ago, 70 tombstones were destroyed in the Bielsko-Biała Jewish cemetery on the 17th of June. For a change, another group of teenage boys destroyed several dozen tombstones at the Jewish cemetery in Wrocław, former Breslau. And this damage is not about spaces that are or have been created by artists or are being documented as monuments, but this is about destruction of places of memory in the strict sense. Places that were considered and registered as monuments already in the 1980s. So this is a fact that we're facing today, and that we somehow will have to relate to today. Of course, protected places are a different issue. Places such as the camps that are protected by special regulations. But these are places that you have to really go to make a tour to, and these are not places of the memory that we are concerned with today in our discussion today. That is the visibility of the past that is somehow organically present in what we have today. So, I've been thinking about this for a long time, on what is the art that you create and the ideas that you spread, and I've come to the conclusion that it is, well, again, it is about work that has to be put into the concept of commemoration or documentation, which is a form of commemoration. It takes a lot of time and work to create such concept. Perhaps it'd be very sad what I'm going to say, but my conclusion is that it's not enough to burn stables like Rafał Betlejewski, the artist. But if a commemoration is to be of some importance, it really needs a lot of work to be put into it. So let me ask, or begin. So let me ask. Let me start not with you, Natalia, but with Wojciech Wilczyk and his project, The Innocent Eye Does Not Exist. Let me ask you about this. This work. How big was it? How long did you work on it? Well, I did this project relatively short. It took me 2.5 years. I started it in the autumn of 2006, in September. And on the 4th of December, I took my last pictures. And the book was published in 2008, so the speed was very fast. But it was because I did it, I financed the project myself. And in the meantime, I took a project in Liverpool that was financed by the European Union. And this allowed me to spend some time with my son, who was born in 2007, and I took over all the duties, parental duties over my son, and in the meantime also took photographs, sharing my parental duties with my wife. So I worked very fast, but I wanted to do it very fast because it was a moment where those buildings were in the process of being taken over by the Foundation for the Protection of Jewish Heritage, and that they were changing owners, they were being rebuilt. So I thought there was the last moment that I had to intervene and document these places. But of course the order was different, because at first I meant to do some kind of artistic provocation. I wanted to juxtapose photographs of 10 synagogues in bad shape with 10 churches, the Catholic churches, erected after 2000, in the vicinity of the synagogues. and to make some kind of artistic provocation action. But when I started going around, traveling around, and I started photographing these synagogues, I realized that the provocation would be of no avail, because what I can do, what I should do, is to photograph all the synagogues that I know of and that I can reach. And during my work, certain solutions came up. So the fact that one photograph only presented one object, and I realized how to present it in the form of a book, because I didn't want to do a typical photo album. I didn't also want to aesthetize it, make it look beautiful than it actually was, but take into account the fact that it was meant to be an artistic project, that I wanted to do some kind of lexicon. I used the format of a hotel Bible, sort of like Gerhard Richter did. There was an exhibition in 2005 in Zamek Ujazdowski in Warsaw about this kind of Bible, and though the curator of the exhibition and the book didn't much like the cover, and I was given a copy of that, and I liked that format, so I realized this format would be perfect. Dr. Natalia, Romik, your work, except for your work being a conceptual work and a work on the sources, archival work, also based on oral history work, it is also physical work. So perhaps let me start in a banal way. Where does your interest in Jewish heritage come from? This question is actually very difficult, because I can't really pinpoint the starting point. But relating to what you earlier said, to what the English call the parachuting architecture, I think what is most important in the role of an architect is to delve into a problem. I worked in an architectural studio for over 8 years, and I saw how architects tackle very complex problems. And I think the first point of resistance in my work is my project on the shtetl, when I was considering what an anti-monument is. So not a monument, but a place where, together with the local community, we can find out more about the history of a shtetl. We can read maps of memory, in what way the paradigm of nomadic art can let us transfer the knowledge we find in archives, how we can transfer it to small places, to small towns. And this was the moment, I think, like the revitalization of the Chmielnik synagogue in Chmielnik. It led me to come to conclusion how to try and root my findings, also to reflect on what is going on in Poland, on ruling fascism in Poland today. We've created an anti-fascist forum where whose members actually include various anti-fascist men and women. The exhibition on the March of 1968 was also a kind of a protest against what is going on in the political discourse in Poland today. But referring to your question, I think I also started to contemplate what museums, the ferment that they create, like here in the Galicia Jewish Museum, how this kind of ferment allows us to be more and more perfect, ideal in creating exhibitions and being interdisciplinary, which Polish academia science is not always willing to publish. Like like my research of searching for the story of people hiding in the Jewish cemetery in Warsaw during the war. So my postdoc program would not be possible in Poland, would not have been possible today because of the financial problems. So this is a very broad question, but grassroots work with archival sources, or what Wojciech said, his project on the synagogues. So this is what should be done. This is my first round of questions. We know each other, so I'm going to pretend we don't. I'm turning now to Dr. Edyta Gawron. Well, we know each other well. So my question to you, Edyta, is, well, you a specialist on Krakow and on the border between what is Polish and Jewish, what is not Jewish and Polish, and Jewish Polish. You sort of try to identify in your work, in your thinking. On the other hand, we have the area of the Plaszow concentration camp that is being commonly used. But the question is, how do you see the future of that place? As someone who knows from the very beginning
pomieszania się ludności polskiej z żydowską i teraz robimy to tak, trzeba to robić już poprzez rzeczy, wprowadzanie właśnie rzeczy historycznych w przestrzeń współczesną, jakoś tak to rozumiem.
So how to introduce history into the common space? How would you see it? What should Krakow be like in order to be inclusive of Jews, not only of tourists, but also of Jews, like those Jews who died? You're opening up a question that would last all night long, and this is like a Pandora box in the context of the discussions that surround the Plaszow concentration camp. Let me start historically. As a historian, I have this tendency to speak chronologically. So I think this inclusive kind of thinking, let me show it to you on the basis of the exhibition in the Schindler Factory Museum, and the concept of this exhibition that was clearly designed already by politicians. From the start, they had a vision of what this museum should show, and that it should show the righteous, the Polish righteous among the nations, or it should show the story of Oskar Schindler, or at best it would be a museum of the Holocaust. So how to kind of move out of this concept that was imposed on you? And the team that worked on this exhibition said no to all of these propositions, and in turn insisted on a broader vision of the Second World War, and thus the time of the German occupation in Krakow, in order to show all the different fates, to show the Jewish population of Krakow not in detachment as a separate community that whose history is not linked, tied to the history of the neighbors or to the history of the occupied, but that it was a community that is integrated with the other groups, in order for it not to be treated instrumentally. So it was a way of thinking that was meant to be inclusive. We wanted to treat it integrally. It's just one of many examples. There are more such examples in the history of our city. Like here in the exhibition of the Glacier Jewish Museum, we want to show the common fate of history, Polish, Christian and Jewish. We still lack the understanding of togetherness, interconnectedness. So coming back to your question about Plaszow, there is an ongoing discussion why Plaszow should be commemorated. For many local inhabitants, this is a memory of Jewish memory, and it's difficult to get through to them. There is also a place of broad memory, of broad Polish memory, broadly understood, including Jewish memory. There is not only a place about the memory of the Krakow Jews, that is the history of the city, that Polish citizens were prisoners of this camp. Among them, citizens who are not Jewish. So there is a much broader history than what is generally thought. When you treat it narrowly as Jewish memory, then many people find it easier to deny this kind of memory. It is much more difficult for those local inhabitants to reject a memory that is much broader. And let me tackle yet another aspect, namely that the aspect of memory versus life. What we should do to commemorate, to preserve, to maintain, and on the other hand, to let the inhabitants live. To notice that the place, the so-called meantime, lived its own life for the 70 to 80 years after the war. That there is a new layer of urban tissue that sort of wove around the former Plaszów camp, and this is also a problem. And the same kind of problem was solved in the case of the former ghetto, where a special kind of commemoration was created in the form of special chairs that are integrated with the vicinity, and how to do a similar kind of integration in the case of the Plaszów camp, how to integrate it with the residential area just outside it. So this is also a problem that's being solved, and answers to these problems will be worked out over the subsequent years. One of the effects of our discussion so far is the creation of the Karl Plaszów Museum that has already formally been created, is being developed. Concepts on what it finally should look like are being worked out. I understand that ideally, in some natural way, people should find out about the Jewish past of a place being in the city, but this is not always how it always happens. And I was surprised that in Warsaw, the students of one Warsaw high schools that I'm in touch with, these students didn't know that the Jewish Historical Institute exists. Some people have had enough of the Polin Museum. It's very attractive for schools, and many people have already been there. But the Jewish Historical Institute, Żych, it's a fascinating place for young people. It's not just an ordinary archive, and these kids simply didn't know about that place. So there is a certain exterritoriality of certain places. Anyway, my question to you, Wojciech, is what does your guilty eye, as opposed to innocent eye, your guilty eye of an artist, what did it see? Let me just refer to Plaszów, says Wojciech Wilczyk. In the 1970s, I appeared there for the first time with my Zenit camera, with my Orwo film, East German films, and I wanted to take photographs of it and the remains of the quarry. And I met a man who was grazing his cows, and he said, "You know what? I actually shouldn't be with my cows here now because it used to be a camp." And I didn't know that it used to be a camp at the time. You mentioned the residential area. The residential actually stands on a fragment of the camp where the assessment used to be accommodated. And only later did I find out that the place has remains of the two Jewish cemeteries that were devastated and destroyed. That the ruins in the bushes are the ruins of the Beit Tahara, the pre-burial house designed by Adolf Schudemann. But referring to what you said, well, this area was completely enigmatic to me, except for the monument by Zinskiewicz, erected in the 1960s. and the presence of few Jewish groups there. But as for my guilty artist eye, my subjective eye, to me, I was surprised by the devastation of the object I was photographing. Of course, these synagogues were destroyed by the Germans. Later, the equipment was stolen and looted. But after 1945, they were also adapted to new functions. For example, in Gorlice, the external ornaments were ripped off the synagogue in Gorlice in 1967. So I was surprised or taken aback by the nonchalance in those objects being treated, how those objects were treated, because these ceased to be objects of religious cult. And quite often I was accosted by local people, which I developed into dialogues, conversations that I called "Was it a synagogue?" that I inserted into my books. But I was surprised by the number of anti-Semitic cliches that I encountered. Well, I had never found it in my close family, so I asked the question of how it was possible that people younger than myself use expressions and terms and names whose roots are in pre-war anti-Semitism. So I was surprised by that fact. And these conversations also allowed me to conclude that there is something that is incongruous in it. Although Beit HaKnesset, a synagogue, is not holy as a church is, and yet at the same time it was the fact that I was taking photographs of it was treated by the people there as if I was trying to show something that should not be taking place. That a place that had a religious function should not be a workshop or a garage or a storage place. And did people take it as an accusation towards them? No, they did not. I was treated more as a messenger of the descendants of who am I sponsored by, or who is who are my photographs being are going to be given to, who am I working for? Am I working for someone who's going to take the property back? In 1997, the buildings of religious functions were given back to the Jewish community, so perhaps these questions were asked in this context. But what I was really surprised by was, at that time, was the kind of expression that those people use. But today, at the moment, these expressions are used in public discourse by the top echelon of our politicians. In 2007, when I was working on my project, and at the time, the discussion about Jedwabne was still going on, following the publication of Jan Thomas Gross, and I started at the time to take down all the anti-Semitic expressions of Polish politicians, but I stopped after a short while because I wasn't able to note all the expressions. Yes, I think you're right. The state of Polish anti-Semitism is a thing constant. Perhaps different surveys show it differently, but I think it's transmitted through families, the knowledge of those hackneyed slogans. Well, where do they come from? Well, let me say that when I was attempting to talk to the local people, well, in certain cases, I didn't want to go deep into a deeper discussion, but after I heard certain things for yet another time, I decided I need to use those discussions, those expressions. I didn't record them because recording such discussions was a bit formal, official, but I started to take them down in notes. But of course, these exemplify the language that is all around. In my perception, it it is different. So many generations have passed that this kind of language actually should have been forgotten by now, but still it somehow continues. It lingers on. People somehow learn it again and again. Let me now ask Natalia, please tell me about your, as you called it, your holidays in the Jewish cemetery in Okopowa and Warsaw. You found a place or places known from the sources that were so hidden. Perhaps there are many such places, but you reached these particular places. These places were hidden, concealed, well, like many hiding places in towns, in cellars, in basements, in people's apartments. But a hiding place in a cemetery or in a tree, these are hiding places that have the kind of potential that makes them famous. Please tell us about this. How do you think of this? Well, answering your first question, why I started to work on shtetls or synagogues. So I think I started because I didn't agree to that urban order or the architectural order that I saw around. And as for the hiding places, that the public discourse, like the public discourse about the righteous among the nations, who are wonderful people, but the public discourse uses them as a fig leaf, and the public discourse tries to forget about the long shadow of the Holocaust. So I started to think about, what about those hiding places? Synagogues are being eroded. Wojciech, your photographs show it explicitly. But what about hiding places? Well, nothing is happening to them. They are being eroded. They are disappearing. They quite often were created at night with a spoon, with a knife, under the great pressure of being discovered, especially by Polish neighbors. So where are those hiding places now? This project is still impossible to carry out. So I took 10 places that I found in nature, like in the Jewish cemetery, in a tree, in an attic, or in a nunnery, or in meadows or fields. So my question was, how were they built? Who built them? And I wanted to focus on the architectural design of those hiding places. Well, the Jewish Historical Institute is a mine of knowledge, and I found there a beautiful report by Schimberg, who showed how hiding places were built. This document consists of 6 pages only, but he created a micro-classification. And on the other hand, you have the book by Marta Tokarska-Kobel, published some 10 years ago, that also analyzes hiding places, but she analyzes what is going on with these places today. So I decided to classify those hiding places in the Okopowa Jewish Cemetery in Warsaw with Witold Wrzesiński, the director. Well, collaboration with him is just phenomenal. I wanted to stress that an architect studying or an artist doing projects never works alone. He always or she always needs a coalition of assistants, helpers. And we have to mention them. We have to give them the credit. So in addition to a book that is going to be published about the architectural aspect of those hiding places, there's going also to be an exhibition in Zachęta in Warsaw that is going to show casts of those places, architectural bodies of those hiding places. So I think this project also speaks a lot about us szmalcowniks, those who gave people away, but also the architects of every day, whom we will never get to know. And if we do get to know, then thanks to the coalition like those with Joanna Jandrus, where we managed to find the 10 people who managed to go through that hiding place. So when we're going to create a commemoration of these hiding places, we're going to do it through a glass that is going to cover the hiding place. So all this started with my with protest, my protest against the state of current affairs. So let me ask about the political side of all this subject. Why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Is it a problem of money? So is there no money for all those Jewish monuments? Is there any kind of national conviction that if Jews want to have their commemoration, that they should pay for it? They should pay for it with money from abroad? And I think perhaps to some extent this is how it's done. So is this the problem? Is it about a rivalry of memory? Or is it because attracting people to this subject could result in those people finding out things that they perhaps shouldn't know? So if the more they would know, the more terrified they would be. So we have money on one side, and then we have Polish patriotism versus the Jews. And three, perhaps you shouldn't delve into the problem, or is there anything else yet? This is a very difficult and touchy subject, but the question why Jewish monuments are commemorated and on why they are not, because all the three aspects you mentioned contain both positive and negative aspects. I remember many discussions whether something should be commemorated, renewed, or turned into a museum, a Jewish museum. But let me give examples from outside Krakow. Although perhaps they are somehow connected geographically, politically with Krakow. One example is Dąbrowa Tarnowska, and the other one is Działoszyce, two shtetls, where other synagogues, like in Dąbrowa Tarnowska, have been preserved, or ruins of a synagogue, like in Działoszyce. The fundamental question was when questions of preserving or renewing the synagogues were the question appeared among the local government. What is it going to give to us? What profits will we have? What our town or village will have? What will how will the local community profit from it or benefit from it? So what is important is actually to show it to them that these are the few or the only monuments that could attract tourists to this locality. So in such moments, mercantile thinking surfaces that these places could be a product that we could market and make our town attractive to visitors. So I find it positive that someone thinks as a good governor. But then another question appears. Okay, imagine we renew it or preserve it. What will this monument serve as? How much will it retain its original form, and how much will it be used for other, even abstract purposes? So this would mean that it will lose its ties with Jewishness, with its Jewish past function, and each of these two places actually had to work out its own conception, like a community center or a culture center, or will it be a building where the local community population will be able to organize some kind of event, not particularly connected with the the past of the place. I think money is and can be found if someone wants to renew or restore a place. But money also appears once certain requirements are met. So one such requirement is the restoration of the Jewish place, but another one is the concept of what function the place is going to serve. Because the donors often want to know that the place will somehow commemorate the Jewish past of the past, and sometimes this is too much for the local population. As for the second aspect that you mentioned, Polish patriotism, it's also can be a matter of discussion. I don't want to go into details, but wherever there are good educators, this is important. We should bear in mind education is very important. Wherever there are good educators, they can explain patriotism completely differently than from how it's presented by the right-wing version of patriotism. In many of the former shtetls, there are phenomenal teachers who explain patriotism as pride of history, as acceptance of the town's diversity and of the town's diverse past. So they explain patriotism in a positive sense, and this can give rise to a project that commemorate Jewish spaces. But then there is a different interpretation of patriotism, and then the other interpretation of patriotism says that Poland can never be talked about negatively. Then when we speak of the past or of the Jewish past, you should mention anti-Jewish pogroms that took place in Poland, that you should mention Schmalzowniks, or the people who traded Jews to the Germans. So the problem here is how to approach history if you cannot show it in its complex dimension. So these two aspects, two elements, after a long discussion, usually the third aspect that you mentioned appears. We'd better not touch it because it involves too many questions. We don't like questions. Of course, I'm overgeneralizing. Many local communities don't want certain questions. They want to ask certain questions that are ticklish, that could generate certain problematic answers. And this is also the case of many smaller towns, but also of big cities like Krakow. There are certain subjects that you never tackle. Do you have an idea, an overview of Poland? I try to follow various events in Poland, also outside Poland, and there are certain regular features. So there are certain typical features typical of Central and Eastern Europe that are the same in Poland, or Ukraine, Lithuania, or Slovakia. I'm asking you one by one. We've been talking for quite a while now, question by question, a round of questions. But if you feel that you want to step in, then please feel free. Well, you mentioned shtetls, and I sort of felt obliged to speak. Perhaps you would be interested in what the process of restoring a deserted synagogue looks like the synagogue in Chmielnicz, where I created the project of how to reuse this space of this post-Jewish space. The town of Chmielnicz had no money for the revitalization of the synagogue. It is also a town where a Jewish festival was organized. Some people find it kitschy, but I find it a bit. I still find it better than anti-Semitism. the mayor who created the synagogue is not a mayor anymore, so there's been a changeover in the local government. But it was really touching that a town that really had no money itself used EU funds and private funds, quite a large sum, to create a form of bima, the glass bima in Chmielnik that you might know. And there is always some kind of event takes place in Chmielnik, from either local housewives meet or films are being screened. And so the role of the architect is very important, because he or she is not important to go there and create a visualization, but they have to go there many times and work with the local population. In Gliwice, in turn, a similar situation happened in the house of the Upper Silesia Jews house. It used to be a Beit Tahara, pre-burial house, 19th century neo-Gothic building. And again, the question appeared, what is going to become, in addition to the exhibition that has to be there, what is going to happen with the place? So we should restore the memory through an exhibition, the history of German Jews, because Gliwice used to be within the German state before the war. But what to make of this place? So we also should think what a town or a city is lacking. Perhaps should incorporate the commemoration with the current needs of the town. So we should also give this space and this new institution and the town or city space for its local plans. I think we should really support such small places like Chmielnik. And as for the question of money, I know quite a lot of officials, clerks, especially women, who in small places are quite efficient in gaining funds. But if certain museum centers start to compete, what if a branch of the Markowa Museum of the Righteous is going to appear in Warsaw? This will be very problematic. The mayor of Chmielnik, Jarosław Zatorski, a Pole, non-Jewish Pole, his rival who took over power after him criticized him that so much money was spent on revitalizing a synagogue rather than spend it on some other public needs. I also try to follow what is going on with the synagogue that I photographed in 2007. This is actually what I was going to ask you about, said Kazimiera Szczuka. So I realized, says Wojciech, Wilczyk, that there is no particular rule. It always takes a group of people who want to do something, like with the synagogue in Wielkie Oczy. The synagogue, after the publication of my book, where I showed it as ruins, was shortly after the publication of my book was restored. It's a town where there is no Ukrainians who were resettled from there. There is no Jews. There's only ethnic Poles there. There is a Catholic church and an Orthodox church, but the Orthodox church is closed, but the Ukrainians are gone. But after the publication of my book, after the local community saw that I photographed the ruins of the synagogues, there was a grassroots group that decided to restore the synagogue. Another synagogue in a different place, where a synagogue is going to have the roof restored over the ruins. And money from the Polish government has been obtained even. And in the future, this synagogue is going to serve, from what I've read, as a center for Polish Jewish youth meetings. So it's good if an object like this becomes a building that has some public function, like a library or a concert hall or a community center. It's much worse when it becomes a hotel. like in Kolno, or a commercial object like in Olsztyn. The synagogue, or the ruins of the synagogue, was burned down, and a replica was erected in its place that was turned into commercial purposes. So it all depends on the local population, on the energy, on the concept ideas, or their protest to the fact that a building that used to perform a ritual function for the Jewish neighbors suddenly is in such a bad shape. So my conversation with that Chmielnik mayor was very moving to me. But of course he wouldn't have been able to. He couldn't simply give this money away that he spent on the synagogue. Of course not. But were people who voted for the new mayor really so naive that this money was taken away from them and spent on the synagogue? Well, I think that politicians' speeches do not really have to literally refer to facts or relate to facts. In the case of the Dąbrowa Tarnowska synagogue, a local businessman, a local publisher of a local newspaper, put up banners, billboards, said that the Jews have a synagogue, and our local businessmen have financial problems because of that. Completely against the facts, denying the fact that this money couldn't have been spent on anything else except for the restoration of the synagogue. But when we listen to our Prime Minister Morawiecki, you realize that he's able to say anything without any consequences. He can lie and tell egregious lies without any consequences. As for your question about the cooperation with the Mayor Zatorski in Chmielnik, when we came to Chmielnik, the local population told us their dreams, what they wanted to have in the town, what they see the future like, why it's important to speak of the Holocaust, why it is important to show a photograph from the Kielce pogrom where one of the Chmielnik Jews also died. And we started create drawings of what the local population really wanted. We carried out some kind of negotiations. I don't know if you could call them sociological, but what was going on at the time. Some people called it philosemitic. Well, I don't really like it, but imagine a big sport hall in Chmielnik before the museum, the synagogue was created. Gym benches was put around, and the mayor started going around the local population, pours plum brandy to them, there's some food and snacks, and he said that we're going to create a synagogue, although there are no Jews, that we're going to do some dances, even though the dances are some kitschy, but it's the local population who wants to do things. It's the initiative, a local grassroots initiative. Let me also share one remark with you. I've noticed that local population respect much more synagogues that are in the domain of the town, that serve as a library or community center, and those that are private spaces are not respected that much. Like in Woods, there are no regulations how to restore its frescoes. The synagogue in Woods now serves as a shop simply. So we also should be critical of certain solutions that the Fund for the Restoration of the Jewish Heritage also does. If I can add something to what you said about Chmielnik. This is a fascinating case to me, not only for Chmielnik itself, but how the mayor of the town, Jarosław Zatorski, tried to resonate, influence the surrounding towns, how he carried out talks with their mayors, how he explained the mechanism, how it works, and why he was doing what he was doing. and he did it out of his personal need of a sense of obligation towards the residents of the town that died in the Holocaust, and he systematically tried to incorporate the history of the Jewish community into the history of the town. It's one of the few cases that, out of its own initiative, worked out a publication on the history of the Khmelnyk Jews, thus paying a tribute to the Jewish inhabitants, residents of the town. Another component that needs to be mentioned in the case of Khmelnyk is the cooperation between the local government of Khmelnyk and the Catholic clergy of Khmelnyk, between the town authorities and the Catholic parish, which played an important role in persuading the local community to take part. And some of the meetings took place in the church where certain things were discussed, and this showed that there was a dialogue, although it wasn't easy, that there was a dialogue in the local community. And that meeting was very important, and I wish there would be more such meetings. Today it seems surreal, it seems impossible, but these were very important meetings. And another very important thing, Mayor Zatorski referred to the Polish heritage abroad. He said that he wants to act the way the inhabitants of towns outside Poland, for example in Ukraine, how he would like them to act towards Polish legacy and heritage. And when he talked to the mayor of Działoszyce, he said, imagine how would you feel if you went to a place of your ancestors in what is today Ukraine, and you see that the town or the house of your parents, grandparents is destroyed, and there's no one to remember about the Polish inhabitants of the town. Imagine how Jews visiting your town feel. And it was very emotional. He tried to locate it very emotionally. So to put it sarcastically, you could say that his critics could say that he's been bought by the Jews. Okay, it was meant to be a sarcastic joke, but to show the benefits that result from dealing with the Jewish past of a town. These benefits can be very tangible. It's not only the Jews will start coming back, visiting the town, and will, for example, eat or in this restaurant or that restaurant, but it's just that the town will start to exist on the map of Poland and Europe, not only on a map of Jewish heritage, but also on a map of Europe that is important from other perspectives. And I think when you travel around and try to explain to people, I think you use this kind of argument, don't you? That preserving Jewish heritage can bring a lot of benefits, not only ethical benefits, not only spiritual, but also other. Well, perhaps I should ask the question: are they benefits? Well, and I want to mention the question of identity. Too many of those places, it's a matter of identity, of building identity around those places. You have to remember that many of those places lost their characteristic features during the communist years. They were sort of silenced, stifled. The individual memory was lost, and these projects is an opportunity for them to build the identity from scratch, anew, and preserving the Jewish past of a town can be the beginning of building a town's local identity, to rediscover the identity of the local inhabitants. There are many projects with whose methodology has been confirmed and works. For example, oral history and people working on those projects learn how to do this, and then they transfer it to the local yard, to the local town, local village. If I may, I think it's also a question of facing the past, of tackling the past that you don't want to remember. A few years ago, I wanted to do a replay, in a way, of my innocent eye, and I traveled around and I went to Clemonte, the town of Clemonte, to notice that the state of the synagogue has exaggerated since 2007. The synagogue had no door. Some youth were standing there smoking cigarettes in the doorway. And the building, behind the building, there used to be a cemetery. And now there is a schoolyard and a school. So the question of the synagogue being revitalized, well, also entails the question of the cemetery. A fellow accosted me, and I thought he would confront me with a number of anti-Semitic slogans, but he also wanted to make me realize what the synagogue was, and that there was a cemetery behind the synagogue, and I told him I knew what it was. He said he wanted to push through the local town council emotion for the restoration of the former synagogue, but it was rejected. Well, I told him that it surely involves a lot of money, because the building of the synagogue needs huge investment. And he told me, didn't we take enough from them? The rest of the Jews understand that we should give them back now. So I wanted to bring this up to show that some people do realize and do face the turbulent past. Let me also give you the example of Brunalia, a festival about Bruno Jasiński. But it takes place separately from the Jewish space of the town. Perhaps now is the time for questions, discussion from the audience. If there are any questions, please let them be asked now. So let me ask you about the commercial context. Well, perhaps not fully commercial, but yet commercial. What do you think about the fact that the Warsaw Uprising Museum can walk through canals, put on helmets? What about putting such children into former Jewish hiding places? Do you think people would start buying tickets, or would get interested in them? Well, you're smiling or laughing, but I'm asking this question seriously. I can see it's a serious question, but I felt very traumatized when I went through that pseudo canal in the Warsaw Uprising Museum. It seemed to me as it was from the 1990s residential estate. Well, I very much object to that kind of para experience, a pseudo experience that cannot be really repeated. On the other hand, if you want to be serious, then you have to use analytical tools that will seriously show you what that reality that you want to present looks like. But I think I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't be able to carry out such experiment of making people stay in hiding places. But you started our conversation today with the devastation of the Jewish cemetery in Bielsko-Biała. and the recent developments in Poland that are very troubling. I think it's very important for young people, because the vandals were young people, it's very important for young people to take part in cleaning cemeteries and in repairing places. In Chmielnik, school students take place in classes on Jewish dances, on you also mentioned before the artistic project of burning a synagogue, the artistic provocative project like the burning of the Yevamna synagogue. I don't really like that kind of thing. So we have to really carefully think of what and how we want to show it. I'm thinking what the museum in Płońsk, the Jewish Museum in Płońsk will look like. It takes a lot of negotiations, a lot of discussions with officials. So carrying out such discussions, political discussions, but also concerning the content is very important. Prime Minister Morawiecki, he said about our temporary exhibition on the anti-Semitism of March 26th, he said that he criticized the exhibition because he said that everybody felt at home, but I wanted to tell him that not everybody felt at home. So perhaps our task should be that to create at home what it looks like, with holes, with mold on it, however imperfect it is, to show what it really looks like. What I'm going to talk about now is not about the Polish-Jewish relations, but Polish-German relations. Devastation of Jewish cemeteries that we face. Well, I want to say that not only Jewish cemeteries are or have been devastated. Lower Silesia has a lot of post-German cemeteries that are in very bad shape. And it all depends on individual people, on the local population. There is a place called Gostków in Lower Silesia. I think it's following 1945, and there is a cemetery next to it, and two ladies, I think they're accountants, activists, they start a foundation that takes care of the cemetery. Trees were cut down, the cemetery was cleared, and at the moment the Magurich Foundation are restoring the tombstones at this cemetery, post-German cemetery. And this is also a process of reincorporating the memory of those who lived there and who were buried in the cemetery into the local history of the town of Wilczyk now. And again, it's a small place. I think it's a village. I don't remember how many residents it has. It's off the beaten track. No one really go there to visit it, and it took two people who protested against the state of the cemetery, and I visited the place in 2014 for the first time. I saw it change over the subsequent years. So I wanted to show that it's possible. But did anyone join the two ladies, or did they do it themselves, only the two of them? Well, they've been obtaining funds from various grants, but the Merkurich Foundation, well, in general, they take care of areas that were inhabited in the southeastern Poland by the Lemko or Ukrainian minority, but they also decided to intervene in the post-German area. And such devastated cemeteries are numerous in Lower Silesia. I also want to refer to your question about experience and the Polish Jewish or Christian Jewish relations over the last 20 years or so. I notice how important it is to meet someone, or to touch certain things, and meetings that take place in schools and towns are very important to be able to confront and to get to know people. In the case of Jewish museums, also important. I understand the resistance of there are certain installations in museums that allow for contact with the Jewish community. For example, to imagine, in order to imagine the conditions of life in the ghetto. I remember how long discussion we had it with the team creating the exhibition in the Schindler Factory Museum, how to show Jews in the ghetto without crossing that dangerous boundary where you desacralize the people's experiences where it all becomes kitschy. So thus our concept when we created white figures or without any particular facial features that will not echo any archetypical stereotypical Jewish features. There are new solutions being introduced, namely holograms, and I was surprised by many things when I visited the Jewish museum, the Museum of Tolerance in Moscow, where various situations, for example, Shabbat dinners were presented through holograms, where a visitor can actually take that hologram arrangement and in a way make this experience more tangible. Of course, some people may find it controversial, but perhaps we should give people a chance for this kind of contact touch. But of course, we also have to bear in mind people's sensitivity and be considerate of people's feelings. To bear in mind that we have to treat like humans the people that we present and how we present them. When you spoke about hiding places, I just remembered my visit to a communication museum or communication museum in Berlin, where there's a lot of locomotives, train locomotives. There's also a cattle car. So the tissue of sensitivity, fragility has to be somehow prepared. There was a plan to kind of reconstruct the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. There are reconstruction teams who reconstruct various historical events. But it wasn't supported by the Polin Museum or by the Jewish Historical Museum, although there was goodwill on the part of the reconstructionists. But there was no... the ground was not prepared, because it's very important to prepare sensitivity. Perhaps after ground has been prepared, perhaps you should let someone enter the hiding place in a tree. Maybe it's a bit like in a fable what I'm saying, but the children, the adolescents who damage the tombstones in Wrocław or Bielsko-Biała, they did not have a plan. They created quite randomly, so they were not prepared. So the question is, who should do the preparation? But in all my projects, in almost all my projects that I did with the Polin Museum, with the Jewish Historical Institute, with Jan Jagielski from the Jewish Historical Institute. So there are pioneers from various foundations, NGOs, who prepare the tissue of sensitivity, as you phrase it. In my case, it's the Zuckerman Gate, Brama Zuckermana, or the Grodzka Gate, where before a project is introduced, we always talk it over, talk about sensitivity, also about the local function, but without local activists, at least in my case, none of the projects would have been able to come into existence. It's a very important element, especially in the fields of Jewish studies and architecture. On the hand, the Polish Association of Architects does not have that kind of sensitivity preparation. There's no esteem, no respect for places, no attempt at understanding various places. You should look at the project of the monument of the Battle of Warsaw of 1920, which was going to be created in Warsaw, and I thought, why on earth has no one thought on created a school and naming it after the Battle of Warsaw? Why is there no park named after the Battle of Warsaw? It's also our responsibility. It's the responsibility of those who deal with the Jewish heritage to perhaps try and change our way of thinking. So I just simply wanted to emphasize the role of NGOs and foundations, local activists that deal with, that work on sensitivity issues and deal with Jewish heritage. You asked who should deal with it, who should sensitize people, who should introduce the local communities, youth into the Jewish heritage. I think it should be done on at different levels. For the last 20 years, it's been mostly NGOs, local activists, also teachers, grassroots activists who try to bottom up redesign the education system. Because the top-down system and its reform of the 1990s simply did not manage to deal with these issues, and so the role of local grassroots NGOs and foundation is very important. But this education should also be part and parcel of school education, and the process of creating multipliers, local multipliers, has been slowed down over the recent years. Some 10 years ago we saw very vibrant summer schools on Holocaust education, on the Jewish past and culture. Over the recent years there's been a slowdown. Changes have become visible in the character of those summer schools. And currently, when the Minister of Education is strengthening its hold of the education system, it might change even further for the worse. School youth, unfortunately, well, they do a lot on their own, but sadly, unfortunately, there's a lot of things that they can't do alone, where they need educators, teachers who will show them things, introduce them to things. But this process, sadly, has been slowed down. Is in regression, and a lot also depends on the students' parents. Wojciech, let me come back to your photographs. Was it a different kind of experience to you? You referred to the sanctity of those places, and I'm being very serious with you. You also photographed communist reality. But so, was your work, your post-Jewish space work, somehow different than the other kind of work? You might say, of course, that the destruction of any matter is sad. Yes. The signal that flows from the lightscape is very strong. Because after 2 years of my work, I felt I'd had enough. I'd had enough of the sad look over the post-Jewish spaces. like 40 years ago in Szeroka Street in Kazimierz, which was empty. Those places were very empty. So it was a very unpleasant experience. And I really had to get over this difficult experience. This project was originally to be, as I already said, was to be some kind of artistic provocation, following the discussion over the Jedwabne and the book on Jedwabne. But quite early on, from an early age, I started discovering certain signals in the landscape that I couldn't somehow explain. I was able to notice them, but I couldn't quite make out what they meant. But when I started my Jewish Spaces project, I realized it was mostly post-Jewish houses. So the signal in the landscape is there. It's quite distinct. It's quite visible. It's possible to register it, to record it. And if you travel around Poland, you see the presence of you see traces of Jewish presence in Poland. You see synagogues that some of which do not look like synagogues. You see buildings that function as shops now, or as residential houses. And you see that there's something wrong and congruous with those buildings, and it is also interesting to register. Let me also mention yet another experience. When I was taking my photos, I was being observed all the time. You know, the people behind curtains. I told you about Liverpool, where I took part in an international project. There, I realized I was not being watched. That the only comments that people had to me was whether I had got lost, and the Liverpool dialect that I found difficult to understand, and another kind of remark was that I shouldn't photograph children, and that was the only two kinds of remarks that I faced. I also entered districts where people warned me I should beware, what they called bad boys, but it really wasn't accosted much. I even took photos in a what they called an area of protests where there was a lot of rebellious youngsters, and a few times I was offered what you might call psychoactive drugs, but I was not observed in general. In 2015, when I was returning to Krakow by car, my car was having problems, and I had to stop in Słowniki, and I thought, why don't I walk around the area of the synagogue and see what it looks like today? So I traveled around, and I was taking photos with my telephone, and I realized at some point that I was being followed, saying, oh, look, he's taking photographs, who has he been sent by? And there were 5 people who commenting what I was doing. It sort of reminded me a scene from the film Ida by Pawlikowski, when the characters leave the house that the main characters of the film used to own, and they were being observed by its current owners.
Jesteś po prostu obrazem wśród nas, ale nie wiem dokładnie, ale rzeczywiście, wiesz, taka myśl, że szkoda, że nie zdokumentowałeś tego Kazimierza.
It's a pity you didn't document Kazimierz as it was. But I remember, Natalia, you are the youngest of us. You were a baby compared to us. But it's a pity that you didn't photograph Kazimierz as it was in the 1980s, of what it looked like in the 80s. I don't have to do it because my father did it. Well, I didn't know that. This is one of the things. Whenever I ask you, is there anything I don't know? No, everything is obvious. So my father, in the late 50s and the early 1960s, he took photos of photographs. And at the first Festival of Jewish Culture, there was an exhibition of his photographs in the Popper Synagogue. I'm working on this material because I want to publish it in a book. And also have photographs, also even from 1958, because it shows the Rama cemetery before the rediscovery of some of the tombstones. Well, I did have an idea. This idea stemmed from my protest against the commercialization that took place more or less 20 years ago after we accessed the European Union, after cheap flights started reaching Krakow, and a lot of pubs appeared in Kazimierz, and I had the idea of photos of the partying going on in Kazimierz, of people getting drunk in Kazimierz. Because this new function of the district, well, I don't like it. But now, perhaps I should say now, perhaps this is better than anti-Semitism. We're approaching the end of our time. So the question is, what is better? What is better of the two evils? Commercialization and mass tourism. And one big party that takes place in Kazimierz, the post-Jewish district, has started to cover, to conceal the historical tissue and the original value of this place. And even with some of the buildings being restored, revitalized, the infrastructure being restored, this district, because of mass tourism and commercial, still sort of remains a place of non-memory, even with those objects being restored, individual objects being restored. What is also interesting is how this Jewish heritage resonates with pubs, cafes, restaurants around, with big parties lasting long into night, with people only quite by accident, in haze, noticing Jewish traces. I remember one such situation that really shook me when at the border of Kazimierz, the former Jewish district, and the old town in the Ditla Street, when I heard people coming back from a party in Kazimierz, I heard them saying, let us move on now to the Aryan side, and this really shook me. I really found it difficult to find out that people could use such slogans. We will have to finish our panel discussion. Let me ask each of the panelists to sum up in 1, 2 or 3 sentences. What is your takeaway from the discussion? I here have learned a few things. I don't want to ask you about your feelings. It's obvious that it's worse, that it's deteriorating, but after the meeting today, what is your takeaway? I won't be able to do it in 1 sentence. Look at my notes, I have quite a lot of them. I think we agree on the tissue of sensitivity, as you called it. They have to take care of it educationally through design, and we have to get united, act together as long as we can. This might be a strong statement, but this is how I feel. And my personal conviction is that I think it's very important to have an assistant that I personally call the shamus, borrowing from Hebrew. It is also very important to come to the local community, to come with an idea of a design. To always come prepared with the knowledge, also including what the inhabitants need, how we always should come prepared. Following in this direction, I want to stress the role of dialogue, discussion, meeting, of trying to work out a solution together, trying to incorporate different elements into it, because this could give rise to a deeper, more profound dialogue that will lead us towards our original point. And we have to do it step by step. And we relate to what Natalia said. You should really have a feeling of protest against what you see. This motivates you. This motivates you to action. Thank you very much for the panel discussion, for the meeting. This is now the last chance for anyone from the audience to ask a question or to comment. Thank you very much. It's a great feeling to be hosted in these walls. So that is for now. We're parting for the holidays. I hope the space of Kazimierz will revive till after the holidays. I hope we won't be hit by a fourth wave of coronavirus.